not a perfect system. Nobody claims it to be. But, Kirby, I guess my first question is, what is the committee's actual goal? Is it to find the 4 best teams or the 4 most deserving teams?
Well, Doug, good afternoon. Appreciate you having me on. And the committee's mission is to select the 4 very best teams for inclusion in the playoffs. So that's what we focus on each and every week, is ranking the very best top 25 teams and ultimately the very best 4 teams for participation in the semifinals.
All right. So, look, based upon the rankings now, I think we can correlate it to a change from 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we were told conference championships matter. Ohio State's ranked number 2. They're not playing for a conference championship. Penn State and Wisconsin are. They're not in the top 4. Is it fair to say that you guys have determined that conference championships are not nearly as important as the previous committee said they were?
Well, I don't believe that it's fair to say that the process and the protocol has changed over the course of this is our 3rd year of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, and the protocol has not changed. It's always been the best teams. Now, when there are 2 teams that are very comparable, when the margins between 2 teams are razor thin, at that point in time, the management committee, made up of the commissioners and the athletic director at Notre Dame, have instructed the committee to use 4 metrics to separate those teams, in which conference championships is 1, strength of schedule is another, head-to-head is a 3rd, if it occurred, and 4th is comparative outcomes against common opponents. Now, those 4 metrics are in no particular order. They're not weighted against each other, and it's up to each particular individual, so 12 of us, as to what we place priority or emphasis on. So the task, the mission has been the 4 best teams, but when there are 2 teams comparable, then those 4 measures come into play.
Kirby Hocutt joining us on the Doug Gottlieb Show. He's the athletic director at Texas Tech. That's his day job. His second job is to be the head of this, the chair of the committee for the college football playoff, which, of course, we'll find out the semifinalists going forward to next week as we have conference championship Saturday upcoming. Of course, the SEC championship on CBS. All right, what about the health of a team during a big game? For example, Colorado didn't have their starting quarterback when they lost to SC. Penn State people are like, hey, we didn't have our 3 best linebackers, our 3 best tacklers when we played Michigan. They were beat by 39 points. How does that factor in to how you rate these teams?
Well, the selection committee is aware of it. We have conference liaisons that each week when we get together, we begin our meeting by those conference liaisons giving a full report on the activity within that particular league. And that will be everything from outcomes of games or special things that happened in those particular games, injury situations for us to be aware of. So we monitor that. We're aware of it. And we're seeing a year this year, and we did, I know, in year 1 as well, where there are several teams with legitimate claims to participate. But the selection committee, our goal, our focus is to take a deeper dive into these teams based upon everything that we have in front of us and ultimately select the 4 very best teams.
Ohio State's not playing. They're ranked number 2. We saw TCU win, but against Iowa State 2 years ago and get leapfrogged. Can you, based upon the difference in 2 versus 3, 2 versus 4, 2 versus 6, the other teams that are playing, how likely do you think there's a possibility of Ohio State being leapfrogged by teams because they're not playing this weekend?
Well, Doug, with respect, I can't answer that question. As we know, every year is different, and we've seen a college football season this year where in one particular week we had 3 of the top 4 teams lose. This past weekend we had 9 teams that were ranked between the 11 and 23 spots that lost. So anything can happen in any particular weekend of the college football season. As we all know, this is an important weekend in front of us with so many conference championship games and other quality games that this is a unique weekend. And the selection committee, we're together in Grapevine on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So we will watch all the games this weekend together, which I'm looking forward to. But as you know, every year is different. Anything can happen on a particular given weekend. But our rankings this week show that Ohio State is the second best team in the country.
Yeah, and you mentioned last night that there's a razor-thin margin between Washington at 4 and Michigan at 5. I'm not speaking out of turn. You did say that last night, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay,
Correct.
so with that in mind, in your own mind, again, like you vote, and your vote is not the end. It's just one of the votes. But can you see a scenario in which Washington plays, Washington wins, but because they don't look great, that Michigan, who actually doesn't play, leapfrogs them?
Well, again, very careful not to anticipate what may or may not happen this particular weekend, and can't presume what 11 other individuals will bring to the table and see in a particular game. You know, as I said last night, Washington is a team that the selection committee has been impressed with all year. They had a convincing win last week against a quality team. Their strength of schedule has been a concern, continues to be. They've played some good teams and beat some good teams. And at the same time, Michigan, there at 5 this week, has a very impressive resume that they've built with 3 wins against top 10 teams. So, and they looked impressive last week against number 2 Ohio State, despite coming up short in that game. So you're right, very small margin of separation, but just cannot anticipate what may happen this weekend.
Yeah, I mentioned Kirby Hocutt joining us, Texas Tech's athletic director, head of the College Football Playoff Committee. He's joining us in the Doug Gottlieb Show. I mentioned that the crazy thing about scheduling is, you know, when Washington scheduled Rutgers was a really good 8-9 win team, right? When Michigan scheduled Colorado was kind of what Rutgers is now. And so they may not have tried to schedule up, but instead they get the benefit of Colorado having an incredible season. I wanted to ask you about Clemson, because I know you guys have all watched these, but sometimes maybe it's about which games you watch. They lost at home to Pitt. They easily, you know, NC State missed a makeable field goal in regulation. Could have lost at home to NC State and weren't great against Troy. Louisville, they kind of dominated the game. Then Louisville took the lead in the fourth quarter. Same thing with Florida State. Like, it feels like Clemson's living a little bit on reputation of last year, reputation of being an elite program the past 4 or 5 years. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Well, it's not a fair assumption to think that past history has anything to do with this year's rankings. You know, what we discuss is based upon, you know, the beginning of this college football season when Clemson kicked off against Auburn and had a win there in week 1, based upon, you know, what they've performed up till this current week. Clemson's built a solid resume. They've got 3 wins against top 25 teams. Extremely talented football team, very talented at the quarterback position, as we've all seen. So, you know, they've built a solid resume where, you know, they are 3-0 against top 25 teams. So they've built a strong resume that's deserving of that number 3 spot this week.